Good evening. So let's start. Uh, Today is the week 4 of our C Sharp lesson. Um, so let me share my screen. Yeah. So far, then uh, so we identified C Sharp as a modern programming language which follows object-oriented programming paradigm, and it is a statically typed programming language. And which runs on the .NET framework. .NET is the framework that we use to build C Sharp applications. Using .NET, we can build web-based applications, mobile applications, desktop applications, likewise, right? Uh, then we discussed the uh, programming fundamentals, like uh, like how to create a variable in C Sharp, and what are the data types, and how to create a function, how to create a conditional statement, how to create a loop, those things, right? Then we discuss uh, about the object-oriented programming. So we think in object-oriented programming, we think everything as a real-world entity, right? A class is a blueprint of a real-world entity, and we create uh, objects that mean instances of that class, right? So then we had four main OOP principles, like uh, encapsulation, abstraction, polymorphism, and inheritance. So encapsulation was basically it's about giving the privileges, right? Private, we had three access modifiers: private, public, and protected. Then abstraction. Basically, with the abstract class, we can't create instances of that abstract class, right? Then we had polymorphism. Polymorphism means different forms. Like in our example, we had a teacher and a student, right? So we we had uh, virtual methods, right? Then inheritance. Inheritance is basically creating uh, derived classes from a parent class, right? And we had the constructor. Constructor is a special method that get called when we creating an object from that class, right? Then we discuss about the web applications. So a web application is basically an app running in a remote server. We access uh, that application using our web browser. So web applications follow client-server architecture. So we are the clients. The person who is browsing using a browser, the person who accessing the server is or making a request to the server considered as a client, and the server is the one who provide the who process that HTTP request, and the person who give the response, right? Right. Then we discuss when we are developing an application, we can follow different architectures. So in a web application, or rather in an application, we can create uh, the whole application as a single unit. So we call that architecture a monolithic architecture. Then based on the concept of separation of concerns, like so we can identify in a web application we have clearly a front end and a back end. So front end is what the user can see. So the back end is the what we write the logic, right? So we can divide them into two, right? Front end and a back end. So we can divide them even to three, right? front end, then the service layer and the database layer likewise. So we call that a 3-tier architecture, 3-tier, 2-tier. Likewise, we can divide. So when we uh, create an application with web forms, we saw it is following a monolith architecture, right? So that's what we learned so far. This is our application. We last week but we got a start to create this employee management system. So now let's open this, and I have opened the application with Visual Studio and run this solution file. Let's run this. Right. So we have last week we created this login page, right? So this was the code, and this .aspx file was the front end content, right? It was consist of the HTML and the CSS, right? There was some special elements that had this ASP extension and the attribute run at server, which means these are server-side components. That means these uh, these attributes will be updated and updated at the server, and that updated HTML content will be forwarded to the user. And this aspx.cs file had the backend logic, right? So we write that logic with uh, using C# language. So last week what we did was we wanted to create a login page, right? We wanted to have two users, and one was an admin and one was an employee, right? So when the user try to log in with his username and password, right, based on his role, so we wanted him to redirect to the appropriate web page, right? So last week we created two users with uh, two users as an admin, as an employee, right? And when a user entered, when a uh, 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 when a user entered a username and password, we authenticated that user. So we went through this list and checked whether the user entered username and password is it matching with one of these values, right? So if it is matching, we returned that user, right? So based on the user role, we redirect him to the appropriate web page. Now, what I want to do is I want to connect this app with the database, right? So in a real world scenario, so this user will be in our database, right? This user will be in our database, and so when a user, that means when someone enter his username and password, when someone try to log in with his username and password, right? I want to check whether that user is exist in our database. If so, if he's a valid user, I want to redirect him to the his appropriate page based on the based on his role, right? So therefore, first let's create a database. So last week we installed SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio. So start SQL Server Management Studio, right? Now uh, here tick Trust Server Certificate and connect, right? So I could connect it with the SQL Server, right? Now let's create a new database. So open the new query, right? Then uh, I'll write the SQL commands, right? So create database. I will name my name database as employee management system, right? So I'll execute it. The database got created. Right? Here you can see the database got created. Right? Now I want to use this database. I want to create a new table as user, right? Create table, let's name it as users. Um, so, so user will have an ID. User ID. It will be an integer, and this is the primary key attribute. Right? Then a user will have a user name that will be Vacha, and the username can't be null. So I have created a user table. Right now, I want to insert some values to this table. So we will insert these values to the table, right? Okay. Now let's see what's inside our table. Select all from users table. So I can see the values are, these values are in our table, right? Right. Now what I want to do is I want to connect my application with this data, this server and the database. And when someone enter his username and password, I want to check uh, inside my database, right? The database in the particular table. Right. Here in the view, here in this tools, go to connect to a database, right? Right. Here, choose the source as Microsoft SQL Server. Let's continue. Then go to this server and click on properties. So this is our server name. This and as your server name, use this, right? And select the database you want to connect with. So I want to connect with employee management system, right? Right. Then click OK. Right. So the application could connect with the database. Here, then you can see the connection string, right? So copy this, right? Copy the connection string, right? Then go to this web.config file. So in this config file, I want to add that connection string, right? Right. So in the web config file, you have to define the connection string. Right. Then you can save this. Once the database connection established, now we can change our logic, right? Here to deal with the user related database actions, I'm creating a new class as user services, right? That class name it as user services, right? Now here I want to uh, get users from the from database, right? So right, let's run this and check whether we can get the user from the database. The password will be now what I want to do is here rather than printing here, what I want to do is I want to create a new user object with the data, right? So that means I'll stop this and here I'll go to this user class and I want to create an object with the user class and I want to pass that user, right? So I want to create a object with from this user class with the data in the database, right? Right. So, uh, so I will create a user, new user in DB is new user, and I have to pass the user ID, username, is password, and user role. Then I want to pass the return the authenticated user in DB, right? Right. Here and now what you can understand what I am doing. So I'm here from this get authenticated user function. I'm taking two parameters, the user entered username and password, and I am checking whether that user is in the database. If he is in the database, I will create a new user with username, password, and role, and I'm returning that object from this function, right? So, right. Uh, then, uh, then I got that user in DB, right? So this will be user. This will be a user, and let's say auth user, right? So here you can see if there is a user, I will return that user. If there is no such user, I will pass null, right? Right. So here, what I have to do now is I can use a conditional statement. If auth user is not null, not null, then he will be having a role. If he is null means that means the user entered username or password is incorrect. So I can write here in our this file we had an error message. So I can say error label dot text is equal to invalid user name or password, right? Otherwise I can say uh, if auth user dot role is equal to role, I want into redirect response dot redirect into admin dashboard. Admin dash dot ASPX, right? Else, that means is an um, employee, so he should be redirected to employee dashboard. Hit the values and the password. So right, I'm getting redirect to admin dashboard, right? So what I have done is I have now connect with the database, and uh, the user input value will be getting reading from uh, the uh, the database. So in here we are using ADO.NET. So in BL classes that coming from the .NET framework itself, right? Okay, so now what I want to do is right now I have this admin page, right? I have this admin page. So I have added, I want you to create this admin dashboard, right? I have added 4 buttons: view employees, add new employees, view leave requests, view admins, add new admin, likewise, right? Like this, right? I want you to create these buttons, and when I click on this button, I should be able to view employees, right? So you have to create a new table in in your database, and you can take employees from that table and show it here, right? And you can create a form and create a form to add new employees, right? Then from the employee dashboard, you have to create a new form to create leaves, right? Then admin should be able to view leave requests and accept them, right? Then he should be able to check other admins and to add other employer, add new admins as well, right? So this is the basics. So so we have created the login form, right? So that was the basic, right? Then you can do everything is similar, right? After connecting the database, you can check how can I create a form, right? How can I store that in the database, likewise, right? So I will upload this code for your reference as well, um, right? Then you can refer that code as well. Uh, so hope you can develop this employee uh, management system application, right? So this is our assignment brief. So in to this module, I want you to submit an assignment which has two uh, two tasks basically. So I want you to write a documentation about these 3 things, right? I want you to analyze the component structure of ASP.NET Evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of ASP.NET compared with other development models, and analyze the advantages of using validators, right? Compare ASP.NET with other web development technology. So here we learn about how we can create an application with ASP.NET web forms. Here we used as we discussed, a monolith architecture. So I want to go through uh, some other technologies, and I just want you to write uh, how this differs from the front end, back end like architecture, right? So let's say you are using some other technology, let's say Node.js, right? Here, there you will be creating two separate applications as front end and as back end. So I want you to, with this understanding, go through some YouTube video and compare these two, right? Then I want you to complete this employee management system application. I think we got a clear picture about how we can develop these applications, right? First, we learn about the OOP principles. Then we learn what is a web application. Then what we learn about two architectures, monolith and front-end, back-end architecture, or two-tier, three-tier architecture. Then we learned that the ASP.NET Web Forms has a monolith architecture. I hope you will be able to develop this application. Okay, so I'll end the class for today. So let's meet again.